you guys, I'm here with Jay Beaubier.
Hey,
Okay,
Nikki.
he has a YouTube channel, and he's also a researcher. He's pretty big on Twitter. He's very active, I would say, on Twitter. That's where I know him from mainly. And he has his own Beau theory, which is basically how the Earth and the Moon, an alternative theory on how the Earth and the Moon were formed with the electrogravity thing. So that's really kind of awesome and cool. So, okay, Jay, how did you tell us about you? How did you get started with this stuff?
Yeah. So my background is a little strange. I actually grew up in Salem, Massachusetts. My family business is grave digging, and my family are excommunicated Catholics, but the cemeteries are all Jewish. And I literally lived in a 200-year-old house playing in cemeteries as a kid. And because of that, I was awkward and weird and didn't have a lot of friends. So I went into school for acting initially as an undergraduate, very interested in like social sciences and history as well, and archaeology. And then I got my master's in comparative religious studies because when I was in school for acting, I was also writing. I got a playwright, play published, and so I'm a playwright. Um, and after that, I just had a lot of questions because I grew up in this cemetery where my family wasn't religious at all and didn't talk about any of this stuff, but I had questions. And so I started looking really young. I started reading the varieties of religious experience by William James when I was like a teenager, and then a bunch of Buddhism. And so by the time I got to writing and dealing with all these questions when I was in my early 20s, I was really looking for an answer to the conflict between religions and the conflict between religion and science. And I was an atheist growing up. Like, I didn't believe in a soul or anything. I never saw ghosts. I never had any weird experiences. I was like fearless running around these cemeteries, and I was like, if there's ghosts, they're afraid of me. I don't know, whatever. And so uh, when I went to get my master's degree, I got it at Naropa, and that's a Buddhist college. And my main thrust of my studies was infinity, comparative mysticism, and like sonic theology. So the power of sound and vibration, but also uh, ontology and epistemology. So how we know things, how we define things, and breaking things apart. Like, growing up in Boston, I was very liberal and into postmodernism when I was young, deconstructionism, functionalism, all these things. And then, you get a little bit older and it's like, all right, let's be a little bit more sticky about this. Let's get in there. And so the ontology and the epistemology stuff is really like, I wanted to know what the nature of reality was. And so that's what I was studying. And so then when I wrote my thesis, it was a way of like tying together the different um, theories of ultimate reality from different traditions, from Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity. And so meshing duality, non-duality, and unity into kind of like a coherent theory, and just like a paradigm where it made sense to me, at least. And that was really grounded in infinity. And so from those studies, I graduated right in the middle of the Great Recession. And so I didn't do anything with my degree, of course. Um, but in terms of like all the
Wait,
ancient
how old are
studies,
you? Because I did the same thing. I'm gonna be 40 in June, and I graduated with my master's in 2009 or 2000. Yeah, I think it was 2008 or 2009, and it
yeah,
was like, yeah, great, right when everything was like,
right.
haha, you wish.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm 42, so
Okay,
exactly.
yeah.
And but I've been studying the ancient cultures, and like that was what initially prompted me to get my master's degree was the writing about the struggle of religions and studying the ancient cultures and studying the origins and like trying to find the human story that we can all like hear and listen to. And obviously that's tied to like the lost civilization and what happened before. And so I was always studying that stuff. Like I read Graham Hancock in like the late 90s. I found Randall in like the early 2000s, like I was following those guys real early. And like I'm a really logical and skeptical person. So like when I think about like what could have ended the ice age, like that was a big, big question for me. And I really like thought about it early, and I was like, I thought about the comet and asteroid thing like early, like in the 2000s. And eventually I was kind of like, I don't know if that can do it, like I think it can, but I'm not sure, And so like I came to doubt that really early. Not that like many could, like, or like a big event could, but like I found the solar thesis and Ben Davidson, like, I don't know, maybe
Suspicious
5 years
observers.
ago. Yeah, yeah. But I was, but even before that, Randall had like kind of, and Robert Schoch had spoken about a solar flash or a solar event. And so as soon as I heard that, when I found Ben and started digging into his science, that became that was legit, and Ben and Randall have spoken and they're both kind of on the same page. Randall's more interested in the geology aspects of it and like pulling up that kind of proof and evidence and the geometry aspect. And so like we all have like a part to play. And like I talked to Ben and I've talked to him a couple times, and like I really want him to like see what I'm saying about the moon, but he's got the sun to pay attention to and all these other things. And
Well,
so that's why when I had a rough few years before all this, before COVID hit, and like I hit rock bottom like right before it all broke out, like in the summer of 2018. And I basically just like I was like, fuck it, I don't care. I could not figure out what to do for a job that was like paying my bills, and like it just kept getting more expensive here in Boulder. And like I have a lot of skills, but I'm just like a generalist, and I'm kind of spread out. And so many of the jobs that I would be good at, I need some kind of technical training. And it's just like I got mad. And then my car got jacked. My grandma was getting sick, and like I just was like, you know what? I don't care. And I was like house sitting my friend, and I started looking at the maps and trying to understand the flood and the worldwide flood. And that's when I like had this like thing hit me. And it was like, I don't want to like say it was like like nobody talked to me or anything, but like all of a sudden I like locked in and
it was
I
like an
could like
epiphany. You were like clear.
more than that though, because it lasted for like a month.
Mm.
And like I like locked into like the universe and the Akash, and like I was just getting download and I could just see the sacred geometry and everything. And I was like finding secrets everywhere I went. Like my intuition was just like on point. And that was when I realized that the moon was tied to the pole shift equation, because that was what I was really searching for, was the pole shift. Is a pole shift possible? What could cause a pole shift? Seems so unlikely. And that was when, so I had this vision, and it was so much information that I couldn't believe, because I was like, this is ridiculous, this doesn't make sense. And so that was, I spent like 3 months just trying to process it and put some of it into my first video, which is why that one's so far out.
Oh,
And
that's
then
great.
like, yeah. And then I just um I just kept digging. And eventually I came up with a whole cosmology about how planets are formed and how this all ties to physics through fractalization. And at the end of it, like earlier this year, or I guess last fall, I figured out a whole new paradigm of time. And so, like, the way that I get my information is is unnerving to me, and it's unnerving to other people, because I have ability to like figure out answers with like a little bit of information. And it's hard for me to like explain why I can see what the answers are, but like I can predict stuff, and I've always kind of had a little bit of that. But since this experience, it's gotten way crazier, and so that's the gist of like
Okay, so walk us through,
why I'm making videos.
like,
Yeah, go ahead.
so first of all, it's like it is interesting because uh, I don't like I'm not 100% sure I exactly understand everything about your theory. I mean, because it looks at like so okay, let me paraphrase my understanding for you, and then you can pick the holes in what I'm thinking, what
Yeah,
I think
please.
you're trying to say. The crater formation of things like on the moon basically are a mirror image of continental placements in certain tectonics or something, and it's almost as if these were formed in a mirror way when there was a separation of the moon from the Earth, and like that's how you can tell that they were at one point connected, and it's some sort of like there was a plasma arc that matched them. Am I at all on the right
Yes.
page of sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, no, that's very close. So yeah, the main thrust, what I figured out was that the lunar mares, their shapes matched the continental land formations, primarily in the Americas, and the biggest ones anyway. The smaller ones, I believe, match up to Asia. But what I'm proposing is that they formed while, and we can set aside the question of where the moon came from in this debate, because that's actually like a separate debate. And this is kind of like where I'm at. I'm so far
Well,
out,
I
like
actually
trying to figure it out. So yeah.
okay, after this I have to tell you my theory that came to me after watching your stuff, but it isn't your
Okay.
yeah, but so you
Yeah.
inspired a new theory in me, so I'll tell you that about that after this. Okay, so
Okay.
go on.
So the point that I'm trying to make is that um, those in the idea of where the moon came from is that there was a giant impact of a planet-sized another planet basically hit Earth, exploded, then reaccreted into the moon. My proposal is that it didn't actually explode, but that as it approached, it began spinning, and that pieces of the surface blasted off, and that the impact of that then formed those pressure. I don't know how to describe it precisely, but like it basically sent, they both probably lost surface area in one way or the other, and then it came to the middle, and then that becomes the asteroids and debris that shoots out.
But the bulk
But
of it, like the core of it would have been that other planet like is the moon. The core of
is the
that other
moon?
planet would have been the moon, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so in my later proposals where I'm proposing this as like a fractalization and thermodynamic thing, um, I believe that the moon actually could have emptied out, and that's why it could be hollow. Is that some of the iron came out through those blasts, and that the moon shrank in this process, and that some of the iron band formations that then hit the Earth and then created the oxygenation event actually came from the inner moon. And so as I've gone on, I've come to believe that this caused the Earth actually to expand, and that it caused plate tectonics to form by the. So basically, the moon coming in and not hitting creates a pressure, and that causes the Earth to expand and the moon to contract. But that essentially, when they first approached, they were the same size, and that because of that, they couldn't get past the Roche limit, neither one. And so when that happened, both of them would have like blown surface off.
And we are a biplanetary system. We aren't technically, it's not actually technically a satellite uh, because of its locked position or something. I think in a technical sense it's a biplanetary. I mean, it's like we're rotating
Well,
planet.
you can see it as one unit, yeah, and that's
Yeah.
actually kind of like part of the fractalization process that I eventually came to conclude is how this works, is that things are splitting apart, and that all these binaries that we see in space are splitting apart,
Okay, so
and that's how.
that's what like okay. I okay, so Dolores Cannon, uh whatever, people might think of her as completely woo woo, but I
I
like
don't
her.
know her.
So she had this, like, she died in like 2012, and she was a hypnotherapist, and she used to talk to a bunch of people, and she was always talking about how like the earth divides like a cell, right?
Yeah.
And then so like I always think about like the as above so below thing. And so like when I was like, especially when I was looking at your images of some of the correlations you made between like the craters to the continents and stuff, what made me kind of think about the origin of the moon is, what if that is, okay, what if we really are in the sun is the nucleus of an atom that's within another beast. That's what, like, we know, like it's like it's an infinity cycle of, as big as the cosmos goes, as little as it goes, they at some point they start fractaling and matching each other. Okay, well, so like my thing is like, if
Yes.
you look at the way cells divide, I'm
Yeah.
thinking like, well, maybe the planets are little cells or something, or we're nucleotides within an atom. I don't really know, whatever. But
Yes. It's
so my thing,
exactly what I'm proposing is that we're living beings. Yeah.
I do
That
think we are,
the
and
planets are
I do think that's true.
the planets are alive. Yes, and that like we're actually, because I propose that this is all thermodynamics, and that like we're born off like a fractal of the Earth. We're
Right.
actually like a microcosmic fractal of the Earth.
I think that that's very
And
on
so
par
like
with what things are.
and
But
so
what I'm
like if you
thinking
think
about the
about how
moon,
we have a magnetic,
oh, sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
We're kind of
Go ahead.
breaking up
No,
a
go ahead.
little bit, so that's why it's like, well, what I was
Yeah.
thinking about the moon is like, I think that's like old Earth, like that's the original cell, and the cell divided, and it's dying, and it's shrinking because it's a dying planet, or it's like a dead cell now, like the cell divided, and like the old cell died, and the Earth is the new cell, and maybe she's gonna divide again. I don't really know, create another system, but I feel all watching your videos really made me have this picture of that happening in my head, as if, whoa, well, maybe the matching of the continental placements is actually because it was one cell that divided, so it is a mirror of Earth at some point, but it's dead now. And yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's the visualization that came to me through all of your stuff.
Yes. Yes. No, it's great. I love it because like that's, I mean, that was one of the videos that I haven't done, is like the how the whole birthing process happens, and like you're a magnetic field, I'm a magnetic field, right? We if we start smashing into each other, we don't break up, a
Right.
baby comes out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so like if another planet comes by, and like that's part of the thing, is that like the process that I'm describing is like different planets interacting, and that the sun divides first to become like Jupiter, and then Jupiter and the sun interacting divide to create the other planets, and that process is the fractalization process. Yes, and
I love
it's
that.
created by the differentiation of polar orientations. So like if the sun is rotating this way and something is rotating this way, and this is what we found, and this is what I point out in one of my videos about Kepler 10b, and a nearby planet can rotate at that angle that's almost perpendicular. And when it does that, it can elongate. And they've like I remember tweeting about
So
that they
it's almost
found
like kind of
elongated
like how
planets,
Saturn is, like
egg-shaped planets.
elongate, like with rings kind of thing, or more like the way the
No,
galaxy.
the physical body of the planet looks more
Uh,
like a football
well, and that's actually technically what
because
Earth is starting to. It doesn't look 100% like a round ball. It is elliptical.
yeah, it's a spheroid. Yeah, it's and so that process of like being this like this and spinning much faster causes a heat differentiation, which allows part of it to break off from the other part. And then that piece that breaks off then becomes the moon, in my theory. And so the the idea, this is not like the Earth fission thesis is not new. Like that's, and expanding Earth are not new. These were ideas that were around in the 1800s, and they were widely accepted until they like stumbled into like a dark alley where they couldn't find the answers. And the expanding Earth they dropped because they couldn't figure out the mechanism. And
Well, I mean, the same thing with like ether, right? They dropped the ether, the theory, the concept of the ether, and then gave it the vacuum. Yeah, I mean, they always drop all these theories, and didn't necessarily need to drop them. I don't think.
well, you know, the thing about science is that it's about quantification. And the only way to quantify anything is to focus on it. And to focus on it, you have to eliminate the other variables. And so that's what Einstein did when he figured out that equation, and he eliminated spin from the equation. The sun's spin is out of that equation. And so there's a bunch of new like theorists, if you're into like heavy quantum physics and string theory and all these unified theories, where they're all pointing that out. It's not like me figuring this out,
Right, right.
or anybody else, you know. Like I keep reading
Well,
multiple
I
theories, and
mean,
they all talk about it in different ways, but they get it. And that's where like quantum physics understands that the universe is a fractal. They're just not quite willing to admit that it's like an infinite fractal, and that they understand how it's tied together, because it goes against so much science that's right now is still really ingrained in academia, and so it creates inertia. You know, I don't necessarily believe in the conspiracy theory. I believe that we're like inundated with so much information right now that we all are losing our minds and don't know who to trust anymore. And nobody can keep up with the amount of information. Like everybody's a specialist, and nobody, even the specialists, can keep up with their own fields. So like anybody can come along and just say, hey, you're wrong, look at this new study. And it's like, well, I didn't
yeah,
know
I mean,
about that. And then
and
there's
with the
ego and all
internet,
that stuff.
we have so much access to information that like people 75 or whatever, people like 20 years ago didn't have this kind of I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
so
And it's
yeah.
not only like the amount of information, it's the quality of it, because now we can like visualize things like in ways that we couldn't. For example, like the Mandelbrot set was only first discovered in 1980, when the computers were able to like process that amount of information and print something out with it, you know. But
Yeah.
now you can like run a program and like visualize the whole thing. And so like Einstein didn't have access to fractals, and that's part of the equation that was missing for like understanding how it all ties together through an infinite universe, you know. But
And
like a
I
lot of
like
people
how
don't
you
like
talk about
infinity.
like that
That's the
time's
thing.
not a consistent variable, which I think about that all the time, especially when we're dealing
Yep.
with if we're dealing like pre-ice age even. I'm thinking like the conditions at which,
Right.
of like the reason that dinosaurs could have been as big as they, or the flora and the fauna, the reason that the sizes could have been different is like time literally could have been expressed differently as well too. Like not just gravity, but
Yeah.
also like the way time was expressed or perceived. And
So
that needs to be really thought about more.
yeah, let me give you my thoughts on it, because actually I think I have what people are gonna like start to think about. And because we just hit this time period where the day stopped getting longer, where there was actually a day where it got shorter, and we're at the opposite end of the cycle from the, you know, we're at the 12,000 year point, right? That's the half cycle of the
Kali
grand
Yuga
year.
thing or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, or whatever, you know, the grand year, the full 24,000 or 26,000, right? There's a big debate about how long this is, how
Yeah.
long the
So
great year
basically
is,
we're
how
at the
long it
full
takes to go
expression
around.
of the separation and now we move in. Maybe.
Yes, exactly. So what I think is that, and this is where it relates to the moon, because the spin of the Earth is directly tied to the distance of the moon. And so, like, I'm not proposing that the moon's gonna like plummet towards the Earth. I'm proposing that on average, it's gonna start getting closer, and it does that on this side of the cycle, on every cycle. And so that by the time we get back to Leo, the day could be actually a little bit shorter, like an hour shorter. Who knows? You know, like to the point where the 24,000 year cycle makes more sense. Like right now, we see it as a 26-year thousand cycle, you know? And but there's people who attested back in the day that it was 24. And if the half cycle is 12,000 years, then this is a variable within the cycle itself.
So then
That
does that make time feel like it's going faster or
yes, but very, very subtly. Um, and and I think that there's subtle shifts happening with the moon that people aren't aware of, that also affect how time is perceived because of the momentum on the Earth.
And what about gravity? Like that, I mean, because if time and gravity are linked, like would that make us heavier or lighter?
So if we speed up, um, supposedly we have to be able to, like, we could get bigger. That's
Yeah.
the way that they explain the dinosaurs, is that Earth could have been smaller, and that if we're spinning harder and faster, time is shorter, but supposedly, like, I don't know exactly how to explain gravity in that context. Like, I don't want to say gravity was heavier or gravity was lighter. It doesn't really make sense to me fully. Like, and I'm not a physicist, and so that's not my specialty. But to me, it makes sense that Earth was smaller and these other things were lighter. Um, and so
Maybe the fluidity of air itself
that's
is easier to move through or something, like, if it's, but
there's a lot of factors that I think that people don't think about. Like, for example, when Earth is spinning faster, more water is going to go to the poles,
okay.
cold, and then the cold shrinks the atmosphere, and that actually creates less drag on the Earth so that we can spin faster. So like in ice ages, we can actually spin faster. Technically, I'm not saying we do, just saying, like, it's something to think about.
Right, right.
um,
Huh. Okay,
and
so
and so yeah, I think about those. Go ahead.
I was gonna say,
Go
so
ahead.
where does this the like squatter man, like what do you think that is like within all the like the plasma arc or thing or whatever, like what do you think about squatter man?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that it could be a lot of things, and I have it as one of my graphics between the Earth and the Moon because, yeah, I think it illustrates actually what that would have looked like um, with the Moon closer. And there's part of me, like, when I first started thinking about all this, I thought that the Moon could fall to Earth on not necessarily
Like
every
re-collide
precessional
with us kind
cycle.
of thing?
Yeah, basically comes swing back by, um, and not necessarily collide, but yeah. And so there's a couple of different theories I have on that. One is that when the micronova happens, that could affect the moon's orbit,
Okay.
um, and that's tentative, and like not necessarily like I'm saying it's going to fall to Earth, but that could be the thing that causes
And
it
that would suck.
um, to speed up. Yeah, and it could blow stuff off. It could get caught in the magnetotail, and so there's a lot of different ways that I think that the micronova could affect the moon, and then that in turn could affect the Earth to cause a pole shift or crust displacement.
Hmm.
Um, but what was your initial? What'd you ask me? You asked me something else.
Oh, I was asking about, well, actually finish your thought on time.
Okay,
I
on
interrupt
time.
you with it, yeah.
Well, yeah. So time is interesting because it's relative to where you're at. I mean, you've probably seen Interstellar, right?
Yeah.
Where they go down onto this mega planet, and 7 years passes for the guy who's in orbit,
And it's like an hour that
and
they're
it's
on
like an
something.
hour for them. No, it's like 5 minutes for them or something. It's
Right.
like really short, and so that's, like, people don't get that. We have like a totally geocentric view of time, that like an hour and a second that are relative to our day and all this stuff, and it's
Well,
not
I
it's
mean,
not real. Like,
even, but see what is also messes me up with time is like I have a tortoise, okay? Like I have a little Sheldon tortoise. He's a little Greek tortoise named Sheldon. He's 34, but he's supposed to be 200 years old. So like I'm going to have to figure out somebody to leave him with, like, whatever. Um and I love him. He's like the size of a hamburger and he's so cool and stuff, whatever. So that's my pet. But like the thing is when I watch him eat sometimes and I think about it and I'm like he maybe it's just your like the percept okay. So humans have 24 frame rates per second. Like that's how come like if you take 24 frames in a second, that's why it looks like a moving picture, right?
yep,
So and if you want to make a 3D, you do 36 frames per second. If you want to if you go like 100 frames per second, it's too much information. Our brain can't even perceive it. Okay?
right.
So the and so like part of me is like, okay, well, that the part of your brain that perceives frame rates, like what if that's different even within like an immortal jellyfish to a fruit fly that lives 3 days? Like what if the fruit fly can see like 1,000 frames per second? It's like and then it dies, because it's all about its perception. And then like the reason that my tortoise is going to be 200 years old is because maybe he sees 16 frames per second or something, and maybe the immortal jellyfish sees 1 frame per day. I don't really know. Like I'm just trying. I wonder sometimes it's not just the physicality of what's there. It could also be a perception thing too. And then if that's the case, well, then you get into the whole like, what is reality, you know? But
Yeah.
anyway, so
Well,
I think about that a lot.
this is what I spend my days thinking about. Literally, like I spend my
Okay.
days thinking about this by myself because I'm like I don't know who to talk to
This
about
is the
this.
kind of
This is
thing
crazy.
before
Whatever
I'm
I'm
going to
thinking
bed at
about.
night, and like I always do that thing where like you press on your eyeballs and you see like all like this whole like universe and your like
Yeah.
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 I like when I go to bed and I always think about infinity and the concept of infinity and like how there can't ever really be a beginning, because if there's a beginning then something had to be got the beginning. And you know and then I go into the time thing a lot on like what the hell is time and why is it
Well,
linear
because
in its expression.
so here's like where like it kind of like came in. Like this is a big like I got lost when I like I say that experience lasted a month. I thought it was like 3 months, and I was like, it's only been like I was lost, and like my sense of time is very different now. And so think about like the sun with no planets. And what people don't get is that like when something doesn't have an orbiting body, it has a tumbling orbit. It doesn't have a stable rotation period.
Hmm.
It swirls around and it can't stabilize. And so I learned that by studying the Earth. They said before the moon, the Earth wouldn't have a stable axial tilt. That's why Mars doesn't have an atmosphere, because it doesn't have a moon to stabilize its axial tilt.
See, I
So the
wonder
moon
about
is the
that.
key to climate, right?
Yeah, I wonder about that in terms of, okay, like different chemical or different atoms, or like you have a hydrogen versus a helium, and it's like, well, or like whatever, if you take like a like iron or something or whatever, they all, like if you look at it on an atom level, they have like different what are the little ball things on for some reason I'm drawing a blank, but maybe you know how like in chemistry,
Electrons.
no, electrons and neutrons I'm talking about like the uh like on an atom, like what are the little other ball? Is it electrons and protons? Yeah, okay, maybe it is.
The electrons are around the outside, yeah.
Okay, so
And the protons and neutrons are inside.
maybe the planets are maybe like maybe your gas giants are your neutrons and your electrons or your rocky planets, and that determines what ultimate
Yeah.
like atom you
Yeah.
are, kind of
They're
atom you are
moving
within.
they're moving towards understanding that. Like they didn't want to admit it like 10 years ago, but like I said, the information now is so overwhelming, and they've realized that like galaxies that we're looking at that look different, it's just because they're turned different,
Yeah.
and that they all evolve the same way. And they're like, the more evidence they see, the more they're seeing that it's the same process. Everything is the same, follows the same laws of physics, from microscopic to the macroscopic.
Yeah.
And it's thermodynamic fractalization. It's driven by the size of the orbits versus the density and the energy exchange between the parts. Everything is connected, but some things are just more closely connected and more intimately connected, you know?
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, because it's like if you look at microscopically, like I don't know, like try like those water bears or something. It's, I mean, there's definitely like they're nothing like we have in our size, on our dimensional size or whatever. But at the same time, there is similarities. So it's almost like each layer of fractalization expresses itself slightly differently, but there are commonality.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yes. So that's where some people get confused. They think that all levels of a fractal have to be the same, and it's not. There's self similarity between the levels. And, like the planets are all obviously round. That's self-similarity, but they're not the same size. They have different densities and stuff like that. And then the galaxies are the same shape, and then people, humanoids, are the same shape, but we're different and all this complexity. And that's what it is that it's the diversity in the unity, and so everything flows through these channels of birth. And it's like, I believe in evolution. I also, believe in the potential of the alien intervention or whatever else, and
Yeah.
futuristic time manipulation of genetics or whatever. But I think that evolution did happen, and I do tend to believe in our ability to work with stone realistically, just because we were more in tune with it back then in a way that we're not now.
Yeah.
Um, and to me, it like I don't think that, like, if they were super advanced like us, like, we don't build in stone like that. Why would, like, it's a
Yeah,
different
well, that's where
advanced.
I feel like before whatever disaster happened at like whatever disaster we think happened that bottlenecked the species, I think we had something akin to a different kind of electricity that we don't have now. Like we had a technology
Sure,
that we haven't
sure.
rediscovered. That's like what I think about
Yeah,
a lot. Like that's where I
yeah.
and honestly, I
So
change every day on what I think really happened with
yeah,
that shit because
right.
I basically look at it all the time, and my every day I'm like, no, this happened, this happened, this happened. So I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
very
Well, here's the
bipolar.
way I look at it. I think that humans have been intelligent for about a couple 100,000 years, maybe three.
That's a long time, yeah.
The problem is that there's this disaster cycle, which is not 12,000. There's actually an event every 6,000
Yeah.
years, which basically resets the clock. And so some of these are worse than others. There's, like, if you think about this as hands on a clock, there's four events. The one in Leo appears to be the worst. Uh, and so we can only get so far before we get wiped out.
Yeah.
When this event happens, it's going to wipe out all technology as we know it. It's just going to be fried. It's going to be done. It's game over. So many people will pass. All the knowledge will be forgotten within a generation. Everything gets wiped out so fast and forgotten. You're right. And then disappeared, blown up, whatever it is. And so the ice age cycle is 120,000 years approximately, the real long one, right? With an interglacial that's like 10 to 18.
Well, technically, we're still in an ice age. If there's glaciers on the planet, you're technically in an ice age. So we.
Right. There's like the ice age, and then the ice age, and there's always,
Right. Right.
but we're in an interglacial supposedly, and then we're going to go back into an ice age, and then that's 120,000 year cycle again, and that's like 5 precessional cycles, 4 or 5 precessional cycles. And so there's ups and downs in all of those. And each one of those 6,000 year cycles, look how fast we went from having no electricity to flying to having a
Yeah, to
population
the world, to the
of
Babylon
8
Tower, like
billion.
world's information in
Yeah.
your hot little hand.
It's
Yeah.
150 years is what it took.
Yeah.
That was it. 200 maybe if you want to go crazy. And so that could have happened. I think it really could have, even if it was just with a small population, if they were smart. And so I tend to want to believe that other species have lived on this planet and left before us and gone to space, and that the aliens who are visiting us are related to us in that
Like
sense, that they're
ancestors
from
of this
here.
or something. Yeah. Or another planet somewhere else could have also produced something in their fractal land that's similar enough to, yeah,
Yeah.
come.
But
Um,
but here's the thing that, and like I talked to Ricardo about this, is that, like, if every planet and every sun has this cycle, it might not be 6,000 years,
yeah, it
but
might be quicker or longer.
yeah. And so if you become a space-based civilization, you're going to be planet hopping. You're not going to necessarily put down roots on a new planet or stay on your planet after an event
Yeah, no, I
happened.
feel like you would Dyson sphere it. You really would. Like that would make the most sense if you could. Just have your own environment or your own artificial environment and soak up resources as you go along.
Right. Which is like why people say, like, oh, the moon is artificial and it's a spaceship. And, like, that would be the most ideal shape for a long-term
Yeah, it's like a
spaceship,
Death Star or
probably.
something. Yeah. I don't know. The moon is also one of those things where like sometimes I'm like I'm being watched when it's looking. Like sometimes I have all these different theories about the moon. I don't really know. I just think we
Yeah,
don't really have the full story of the moon figured out like that.
sure.
It really bothers me that it just so happens to be the same size in the sky that it looks like that a solar eclipse, a full solar eclipse can happen the way that it happens. Like the same size in the sky as the sun. There's something very um like fishbowl tanky about that for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it won't forever, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's what they say. But
And
from
it
our
didn't in the
perspective,
past. And that's the thing, is that that configuration is actually like a sweet spot. And that's why it's in that configuration. It's not just by chance. It's because there's certain distances where the moon would have been in like harmony with the earth. And so if you look at the constructed timeline that scientists propose, and that's where I started getting to the timeline, is because in order to try and understand the cycles and how they form and how the moon could have uh, created those cycles, and with the micronovas and stuff like that, I had to really dig into that timeline. And so that was when I started, really thinking about how they already are proposing that the Earth could have been closer to the sun in
mm,
the early solar system. So now we're already starting to understand that the planets are moving away from their source, from where they come from, that they're not accreting into these places that are just harmonic because that makes sense. I don't believe in accretion. I believe that they're born and they move away. Like, I'm born and I moved away from my mother a little bit when I'm young. And then as I get older, I move away. And then finally I move away, and eventually the moon's going to move away. And right now, I think that it's actually at a point where it's slightly unstable. And I think that the Earth moon system is tied to that. And so that's why I think the Earth is speeding up to actually pull the moon back in, because I think the moon is hitting its unstable point. And this is what I propose with the Lorentz equations using the Rayleigh numbers. And and that's like real thermodynamics. Like, that's, I didn't make that up. That's within like the Mandelbrot set. That's what they use. And Rayleigh numbers are applied to like everything all over the place. And so I haven't seen anybody else thinking about it like that, because they don't think about the Earth changing its speed, and they don't want to think about catastrophism or quick changes, because in this paradigm, basically the moon could pop off. And if
so
it,
how
go
much
ahead.
time do you think we have? Do you think are you of the mindset that like within our lifetime we'll see like the next thing, or do you think that we have some time?
Well, I don't think that the moon's going to fly away in our lifetime. But I think that it could, like in a million years, uh,
Mm.
just for example. But again, it's an oscillation thing where I think that it's a feedback mechanism where if the Earth speeds up for a while, then the moon comes back in, it could shed mass, and
I mean, and apparently,
then it
there
stays
are
lighter and stays stable.
like
Um,
Aborigine tribes and some other like native tribes that talk about the time when the moon came into place. Like they talk about how it wasn't always there.
Right. And so that it would explain a lot of those mythologies if the moon fell and hit like a tidally locked position with the Earth. And so Pluto and its moon are actually dual mutually locked. So both sides face each other. And like Pluto rotates and the same side faces the moon all the time.
Mm.
And so, like, in that situation, if you lived on the other side of the Pluto, you wouldn't see the moon. And so,
I
like, if the moon came down and got tidally locked over the Pacific, which is where I think it usually does,
So
all the
tidally
people
locked,
in the
just
Middle
like the
East
moon
wouldn't see
itself
it.
is tidally locked, right? Like it's yeah.
Right. But so that the Earth too actually became tidally locked.
Mm.
So that, yeah, so the moon is tidally locked in that its face always faces
Oh, I
Earth.
see what you're saying. That's like why the Aborigines, they just the moon was there. They just didn't ever see it because it was tidally locked for them
So it was on basically stuck on the other side of the
on the other
Earth.
side. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that would be, if you've ever played with fractals and strange attractors, you know, the chaos theory and the butterfly,
Yeah.
the two circles, like those are called strange attractors or attractors. And you can mess with them and play with those configurations. And that's where I get some of the graphics from, is I started playing with those variables. And so you can like watch something spinning around its regular orbit. It looks like it's just in a normal plane. And then whoop, it pops up. And then it comes back. And then it shoots up. And then it comes back. And so I think that that's the fractalization process from which like moons break away from planets, or planets break away from suns.
Or attempt to.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Okay.
not that they necessarily do it the first time, you know, they might come back, and like it takes time for things to spread apart to the point where they don't have enough attraction anymore, that if they do that, then they can split.
Hmm.
So,
And what do you think in terms of like, like the planets that have no moon versus like a lot of moons, you know? Like
right.
we're the only one I know of
Well,
that has just one moon, right?
right, right. All the terrestrial planets started as moons of Jupiter and Saturn.
So at one point you're saying we would have been a moon of one of those.
Yes. So in the early solar system, at first there was, just Jupiter. Then Saturn would have been like the first moon of Jupiter, and then it broke away. And then that allows them to like switch places and to like, start tearing at each other. And then once they have a bunch of moons, and then like things start moving around, and this is like pretty commonly accepted, is that the planets rearrange themselves. Like that's the Nice model. It's like all these like weird theories that got discarded are coming back now. Now that the information can all be aggregated, it's hard to deny it.
So it's like
And so the planets do rearrange themselves.
the sun broke off of something, and then Jupiter broke off of the sun, and then Saturn broke off of Jupiter, and then Neptune broke, and then we all
Yes.
like broke out of all the planets, and then
Yes.
it just fractals down kind of thing.
Yes.
And then
And
to
so
what point?
towards balance, towards harmony.
But
And
then
so
at some point, does it all come back together and we all mesh back in, or is it like that kind of yin yang, or is it it just
some things come back and some things go off. It's
okay?
kind of like, one of your brothers stayed home and didn't move out, and the other two did. Some part of our system will break off, like Jupiter most likely will break off and form its own system and take half the solar system with it at some point, whenever. Like when our sun starts shrinking and dying and Jupiter's still big, it'll start drifting away more or whatever. And so with the Earth and Moon, is everything is seeking stability. Is the point, is that the sun breaks off to create that thing that anchors it. The satellite anchors its stability of orbit, of axial tilt,
Hmm.
right? So that's what we want. Like, and that's why we have a kid, and then the kid's running around us, it's orbiting us, and we have to get our shit together, and we have to get stable, and we have to get on a routine and stop traveling around the world and just like fluttering all over the place, right? That's the metaphor, is that the satellites are the children that stabilize the system. And so like, and each system is thermodynamic, and so it can only support so much, right? Everything is governed by this thermodynamics and dimensionality. And so the planets are born, and one of them is too big, so it got flung out. Like there's a missing planet. Like everybody, like a lot of astrophysicists talk about the missing mass, and some people think it's Nibiru. And so in this model, it could literally be a strange attractor out in our nearby solar system that got spit out and is just like trying to get away, or it could have gotten away, and its moons are the pieces that like come back through the solar system. Like that's not like a theory that I'm subscribing to, but I'm explaining why that theory actually makes sense in the paradigm that I'm describing.
Hmm. I
Um,
mean, I guess because of um it's hard to prove and or disprove a lot of this because you know, how we tell that other star systems even have planets is the dimming effect, right? Like, because we
Yep.
can't really, like, the closest galaxy we have to us is Andromeda, but like what's the closest star system, or the closest star to us? Anyway, it's like four. I think it's like
4 light years. Yeah,
million
it's
light years or something. But basically, what we can do is like, what, and you know, I got a couple of telescopes. I'm into astronomy. I like that stuff too. But like,
yeah,
you can't see shit in those things. And I've even been to like Mauna Kea in
yeah,
Hawaii, and then like, you know, I've been to Fort Davis and like
yeah,
you know, whatever, and like the McDonald Observatory and stuff. And you know, when you look like, okay, I don't get to look through the telescopes that they get to look through, but I have paid to look through the biggest ones that they allow pedestrian, you know, non whatever,
yeah,
like regular people
yeah.
look through. And it's, you know, we're basically, this is digital art.
Yeah,
This,
no, we're basically, yeah, it's all digital constructions from simulations and data
yeah, I mean,
points,
it's long
and we have to basically,
exposure, Photoshop to crap, like heightened, enhanced colorizations, this and that.
yeah,
But so my point with that is just that we don't, the time frame is so small, like, you know, like they're like the universe in our mind's eye is almost like experiencing, like when I talked about that frame rate, like it's moving at a frame rate of like, you know, one frame rate per year or something, to where we, even when we do see things like the dimming effect, so we could tell like, oh, that star right there, it like dims by X% every, you know, whatever orbit, so
right,
that means it has 6 planets and they're this size, like the, you know, we can kind of tell like that kind of stuff. But a lot of it's just, I don't know, it's hard to prove because of the time,
yeah,
because things
no,
don't change.
absolutely. Well, I mean, all planetary formation theories are impossible to prove because we can't simulate them. They're like everyone, lunar formation theory, all that stuff. It's impossible to prove. They're all theories. They're all as valid as the next one. I mean, as far as
Yeah,
you can,
but
as long as you
that's
know,
also
you
what's
can't find
important to note though,
absolute fault.
because that means all the theories that we do currently have about like, oh, this nursery nebula like puts out, I don't know, we like a lot of
Yeah,
it's
we
just,
don't know shit.
we don't know
We don't
shit.
know shit. We know nothing. We're totally babies just learning to like crawl and open our eyes about the universe.
Yeah.
We know nothing.
Yeah, but we
And to
sure
think that
are.
we
We sure
know
do have some
something is
gatekeepers
crazy.
that'll, you know, try to be like, "Hey, you're not qualified to even think about this." So, that's kind of frustrating. But I do think that looking at it as an as above, so below fractal, it really does make a lot of sense. It makes sense to me. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm always looking for. Like I said, is that story that I can help people make sense of the world, put it all into a frame of reference where it's simpler. You know, like it is complicated, but it's also simple. It's
Yeah.
unity and it's diversity at the same time. And it's, what do you want to focus on? You know, like, take your choice. It's your world. You get to create the reality by focusing on whatever you want.
So hallucinogens. Have you done
Yeah.
psychedelics? Like,
Yeah.
what's all
Of
that?
course.
Wait,
Yeah.
what's your take on all that?
Yeah.
Good. Good.
That was actually like one of my first visions was when I was like 13. And like I don't have visions where I see things or hear things. I just have these like crazy intuitions where I'm like, okay. And the first one was me and my friends were out in the woods, and I was trying to like chill and meditate and like enjoy myself. And they were all like smashing bottles and getting crazy and climbing rocks and stuff. And so like my best friend and my brother fell off this cliff that was like 30 feet up. And
That sucks.
they were okay,
Okay.
but as we were like coming down the mountain, it was getting dark and they were all like freaking out. And whereas I had been like so on edge up until that point, all of a sudden, when everybody else started freaking out and was scared and lost, all of a sudden I got wicked calm and I just said, I see the path, follow me. And like I just had this intuition that your life is going to be like this. And that's kind of what happened, because like my life was a mess until COVID hit and till my experience before it. But then ever since, like I've just felt like at peace. Like I see what's coming. Like I do think that there are going to be major events coming in our lifetime.
I
And,
think so too.
having grown up in a cemetery, I've been very exposed to death and grappled with the idea of it for a long time. I didn't believe in anything when I was younger. I do now. And so I know that it's okay. Um, and so I see a lot of chaos coming. Is what I see is more than anything is chaos. Because what I think is that at this point in the cycle is where things are the most flourishing, and that we're just entering a contractionary phase in general. And so if we think about it in terms of the spin and the day getting shorter, and as a heat thing, there's going to be less heat, be less to go around. And so there's going to be more fighting and all that stuff. And that doesn't happen all at once necessarily. And these events like the flipping of the magnetic pole takes like 500 years sometimes, and when these cycles, the smaller cycles overlap, that's when you get like a series of events. And so, as I said, my timeline thing, I do believe that the asteroids are recursionary. And so I think that there's going to be an asteroid coming in the next decade that's going to like really wake people up. And what I see happening is people waking up to the reality that not necessarily that I'm describing, that like everybody who's like really looking forward and like processing the information is seeing kind of the same thing, where it's a convergence of timelines, which is like we can't avoid it anymore. And that's like the whole looking glass thing. And like
Yeah.
we're going through a bottleneck. Like there's no way to avoid it. And
Yeah. And I mean, people have different theories about how that will express itself, or they come to that through different mediums or different, what, like branches
yeah,
of study. But I think everybody is sort of feeling that changes on
everybody
the.
feels it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you, I mean, well, shit with that. But
I
sometimes
know.
I also like, what do you think? What do you think happens to us when we die? Then, like, what do you think's going on with reality? Like, what do you think this is?
I think it depends on your level of consciousness. Um, I
Yeah.
think that to survive beyond death, you need to cultivate a stability of awareness in your consciousness that creates cohesion when you die. Because when chaotic things happen, if you're not a stable person, then you get thrown all over the place. But if your axial spin is really stable, and you're self-contained and your magnetic field is is stable, then you can create a wave through the next dimensions
So you
and
think that,
remanifest.
like, almost like your consciousness or soul or however you want to call it, like your consciousness can, depending upon basically its health, it can go on or perish.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's
That's
not
kind
that
of interesting.
necessarily you perish, you just go into like a dark place until you come back, because
Yeah.
we're all fractal patterns, that sense that like this is a simulation and a deja vu, and you've met people before. Like sometimes I like to joke that there's only like 360 people in the world, and there's just different versions of them. And you can
Yeah.
see them in different races, like, but it's the same archetype, there's the same patterns. And that's the same thing with nature. That's the way that it works, and that's why we have so many experiences that echo each other, and why we can connect with so many different things, because there's energetic levels where we're still the same that we don't think about. We're so focused on the differences in this plane and in this dimension that we don't think about the unification of it. And that's the field theory as opposed to particle theory. Particle theories and science is all about separating to quantify. Field
Right.
theory is about understanding the connection and having multiple factors for cause and effect. We are a very linear based consciousness in this plane, and we see A causing B when in fact there's multitudes of factors and causes in A and B interacting with multitudes of other things.
I
And
mean,
so,
that's my biggest sort of um, criticism of the medical industry is that it's like you're a bag of chemicals and it's just material reductionism into like it's just chemistry.
yeah.
But really, I feel like
And so
they're ignoring
this is
all
what's
of the
pissing everybody
energetic.
off.
Yeah.
Everybody understands it now because of the web, because we're all connected now, right? We understand the connectedness, but our science is still particle based, it's still linear based. And so we're moving into fractal time. Everybody lives in their own timeline and own reality. And it's really hard to understand that and accept it because we're used to living in an agreed upon reality
Reality.
that we believed in. We agreed to believe in a collective reality
Yeah.
before we understood how many people there were with such differing opinions. And all of a sudden, we all realized that there's people who believe in a reality that's completely different than mine. I think that they're insane and they think that I'm insane.
Yeah.
And we're not insane. We just are working off a completely different set of information.
Yeah, I mean, and
And
there's beauty in the
reality is like
breakdown,
that.
I guess. But do you? Okay, so with this, you teach meditation, right? Like that's a thing you do in life.
If
You're a big
people
meditator.
want help, yeah, I mean, I have my own meditation that I created, and
Okay, so yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, are you, or at least you talk about, like in your profile and stuff, you talked about your meditation. So is this like is this like a bow meditation or Beau meditation? Like, what kind? What's your take on it? Like, is there a certain transcendental thing or?
no, my meditation is actually based on brain waves and thoughts per minute. So I correlated a counting technique to like how busy your brain is, because my brain is really really busy, and I have a lot of thoughts and it goes really fast. And I was an actor and a creative, and so like I didn't like the whole meditation where like I'm trying to just like numb myself, but I wanted a meditation where I could like calm my brain and like go to sleep and like stop the ruminations and questions and stuff like that. So I figured out a way to interrupt my thoughts. And basically, instead of just like counting to 10 over and over again, because counting to 10 was like the first thing you learned, it's super ingrained in your long term memory. And so doing it allows your short term memory to wander. And so I personally readily acknowledge that I have multiple thought levels going at
Yeah,
once.
me too. Like
Like
counting
when
doesn't
I
work for me. I
meditate,
think neither is
yeah,
focusing on
like
breathing.
if you like meditate and you hear music going, but you're having a thought and you're still also like sensing something in the room, that's like four different levels of thought.
Hmm.
So like I realized that and was like, I need something that's gonna like stop the short term thinking. And so what I did was I use a counting technique that, so like if you're thinking really really fast, I consider that like a gamma state, and I equate that to like counting to 30. And then like if you're in like alpha, you're counting to like 8, or if you're in beta and your mind's busier, you're counting to like the teens. And so depending on like where your mind is at in terms of like how you feel, you can count to one of those numbers, and tune your brain basically
And what's
by.
the optimal thing you're tuning it to? You want it to be to what? What do you want it to
So
be?
for me, it's calming down. I have no problem being like wired and creative, but sometimes I need to stop that and slow my brain down. That's the was the main thing, is to slow my brain down. And so when I just start, the technique is basically to change the counting number from like, say you were counting from 1 to 10 and you were like, you were, I use like 1 to 10, 1 to 11, 1 to 12 when I'm slightly kind of like too busy and I want to like relax. It's somewhere in between alpha and beta, right? But so instead of counting just the same number over and over again, I move the number a little bit each time. So I count from like 1 to 10, then I count from 2 to 11, then I count from 3 to 12, and so on and so on.
Okay.
And whatever number I'm counting, I do that many sets. So like if I'm counting to 10, I do 10 sets. And so the last one will be like 11 to 20, or 10 to
Oh,
20,
cool.
19. Right. So I don't actually normally do that many sets, but like that's the goal if I'm in a place where I need it. Uh, Usually it starts slowing my brain down right away. Uh, and so what it does is the way that it interrupts your short-term memory is that you have to recall the first and last number at the bottom of the breath. So you count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you have to think about what the next starting number and ending number is, and then 2, 11. And so that recall interrupts the short-term thinking.
Like anything
And
you
so
would
there's no room for the short-term thinking to come in when you're recalling, and that'll actually tire your brain out. And so it's really good for going to sleep. Like I'll do it for like 2 minutes and I'll be off.
I'm gonna try that for sleeping, because like that's my biggest problem is falling asleep. I'm good once I'm asleep, but
Yeah,
getting there is my issue. Yeah.
yeah. So the way that I do this, like if I'm laying in bed, I just like take an exhale and I count, and to whatever number I get to, that's the number I start with, and I just do it from there.
Okay.
Because the idea is that the number correlates with the number of thoughts that you're having per breath. And so like, because like I said, we have like 4 different streams of thought, and that's like in a breath, you're going to have like 3 or 4 thoughts. So that's like 12 thoughts. That's where all that chaos comes from.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you pick that number that's like where your mind is at. And that's good for me too, because like I always hated like counting to 10. It always, or 4 or whatever it was, it always felt forced, right? So if you pick a number and you count out to as long as you can and leave a little bit of space at the end of the breath, that fills it up. And then that also helps push out all
And
the
it
random
helps trick it
thoughts.
up to where it's not going to necessarily be the same every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not about just like doing the pattern. Like if you don't like the number that you're working with, like change the number and try something else. Some numbers are easier and some are harder, you know? So, um, but yeah, I've had quite a few people tell me that it's helped them like fall asleep. They're like, I don't know, I was trying it and then yeah, I was asleep. I guess
I
it
guess
worked.
it
I don't
works.
know. Like that's what it does. It interrupts your thoughts. So like you just shut your brain off. So
That's awesome. Okay, so
yeah.
Jay,
And that came to me in a download too, actually.
that's cool. See?
That actually happened to me. I was meditating and it was like all of a sudden it was like, this is what you need to do to stop your brain. And so yeah, it was just I get downloads like that. But
That's really cool. Like I think
so
you're definitely an intuitive guy. So okay, so tell us your future plans here. Like where can people find you? What are you trying to do here? What's the goals?
yeah, I mean, right now, I'd love everybody just to subscribe to Beau Theory on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. I'm moving soon, and I'm going to be getting a new place where I can have a studio and do my editing and do my writing. So I'm hoping that this year is really going to be prolific for me in terms of putting out material. Um, a lot of times with, like I said, with this intuitive stuff, like I get the understanding and then I have to go do a lot of research and then I have to like chill out and process it and like let it sink in. And then I go back and write. And that's kind of the way I work. And so like I'm pretty done processing, like, and I'm bored right now and I don't like want to like study anything else. And I really want to share this story and this idea. And I just want other people to talk to me about it because like I know it's crazy. But
I don't think it's crazy. I like it. I think it's good stuff. I really do. I think
thank
look,
you.
I mean, your theories are just as valid as anybody else's. So I
Yeah, I'm mostly just building off other people's stuff and trying to piece together things like a little bit ahead of schedule and trailblaze a little bit. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and like share my ideas with your audience because like I love all the guys that we talk to online and I sometimes feel like I'm on the outside because I'm always posting like space and like science stuff and like I'm like, man, I was so about the megaliths and like nobody knows that's like I'm telling you, I got clues on the flood and like all this
it's
stuff
all
and like
interconnected. It's really all
yeah,
interconnected. And I
yeah,
mean, I used to I was like I mean, I applied to work at NASA. I had I mean, I have a minor in geology, but I also like took like 4 semesters of astronomy. Like I was like you
Yeah,
said, like I've been a space
yeah, yeah,
nerd for a long time. So I just get jaded with certain stuff. So like it's funny, like when you were in the megaliths, I was probably way into outer space stuff. And then
right.
now that I'm like super into megaliths, you're like way into outer space stuff. So like I think we kind of like did that
Yeah,
times,
I
but
get
like
it. Yeah,
all
yeah, the
interconnected.
jadedness. Like, there's a lot of crazy ideas, and you're kind of just like,
Well, you
okay.
know, it's with everything you kind of end up going like, we don't know shit. Ultimately, we don't know shit.
Yep.
And for me, it's just the lack of humbleness that certain people have about the ability to be like, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Just saying that would help me out tenfold. Just be like,
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
this is what we currently
I know.
think, but you know, we could be wrong,
Yeah.
but this is why we think it, and this is cool. But
Right.
just the, yeah, that it
Yeah.
is.
I used to be a lot more talk down to people, tell everybody what I know, and like I realized that that doesn't work. People don't like that, and I know I come across that way sometimes online because of the way that I type and stuff. And it's like I said, that's why I love the conversations. Like, you talking to so many of those other guys like gave me such like a better context for them, for like when we're sniping back and forth about ideas and stuff. Like, when I have their tone of voice, like I can totally relate to like where they're coming from better, and it makes me like less likely to like overreact and stuff. And
Oh yeah, me too.
so
And
yeah,
like the other thing is that like Twitter is awful for it. Like
yeah,
it's just like like texting people and stuff. I
trigger
would say like
central.
it's just
Yeah,
like the short for like you can't express your ideas quite as good as you can in long form conversations. And I
yeah,
mean, but yeah, like I definitely have really enjoyed getting to know you through Twitter, and I really enjoy all your
definitely.
content. And I think your YouTube channel is great. I want to see more of it, and I
Yeah,
definitely yeah, I definitely think that you're on to something. So keep on it. I like it.
appreciate it. Thanks, Nikki.
So yeah, we'll talk again soon sometime.
All
And
right,
you know, I'll see you online.
cool. Sounds good. Have a great night.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.